This view of Endeavour at the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module, what Ronnie mentioned, the CRS-33 cargo craft, that is docked to the forward port of the Harmony module and will remain in place until after the next crew, the Crew-12 crew, arrives at the station in a few weeks.
First set of hooks open, nominal. First set of hooks open, nominal.
The second set of hooks now beginning to open. We are committed to an undocking, standing by for those hooks to fully retract. The departure of Endeavour will leave Sergei Kud-Sverchkov, NASA's Chris Williams, and Roscosmos' Sergei Mikheyev as a three-man crew for the next few weeks until Crew-12 arrives. The interface between Dragon and the station has no longer been sealed. Standing by for physical separation. About 20 seconds away from physical separation.
Dragon SpaceX, all hooks open, nominal. SpaceX, all hooks open, nominal.
Dragon copies.
Undocking confirmed. Endeavour begins its journey home with the Crew-11 crew. Undocking
Dragon
confirmed.
SpaceX, separation confirmed. Dragon SpaceX, separation confirmed.
Dragon copies, stay the same. Dragon copies, stay the same.
A good undocking burn, 4:20 p.m. Central Time, 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time for undocking, as Dragon and the International Space Station flew 260 statute miles south of Australia.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Depart, burn 0 complete.
So we've had 3 good departure burns. The undocking burns 1 and 2, departure burn 0. So despite the accelerated nature of the timing of this undocking for Crew-11, the crew has executed everything by the book as they begin about a 10.5-hour journey to a splashdown off the coast of San Diego in the wee hours Thursday morning.
Houston Station on 2, ISS thrusters are enabled. Houston copies.
That the voice of Chris Williams of NASA on board the station as we look inside Dragon over the shoulders of Zena Cardman and Mike Fink. We expect Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid and for joint operations to conclude between Houston and Hawthorne in the neighborhood of about 4:40 p.m. Central, 5:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up is Endeavour's departure and exit from the keep-out sphere, the first of these two boundaries that are used to essentially measure the neighborhood of the International Space Station during rendezvous and departure operations. Once again, the view over the shoulders of Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Endeavour's commander and pilot, the two NASA astronauts, amongst the four Crew-11 crew members heading home for a splashdown early Thursday morning off the coast of San Diego. We're coming up on Depart Burn 1 and then the exit out of the keep-out sphere as you look at the flight control team at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California.
As Rob mentioned, we are now standing by for that departure burn 1. And at this point, because Dragon has disconnected from the International Space Station, it's relying entirely on its own power sources, from batteries and generated through solar cells, instead of taking power and telemetry from the space station. You can follow along with the telemetry that we're tracking in Mission Control at the bottom of your screen. When we step into this departure burn, you'll see the initial distance between Dragon and the space station increase further. You also may see the rate come back up. The thrusters on board the Dragon spacecraft are located in the service section, and this burn will last about 22 seconds. In that lower graphic right now, you can see that we're activating some of those micro adjustments as we follow along. Even though all of this is taking place very methodically and very slowly, both of these vehicles are traveling about 17,000 miles an hour. So this is a very carefully...
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Depart burn 1 complete and nominal. This time, you are go to DOF suits per procedure 4.012. Reminder that ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
We are go for 4.012 suit doffing with a nominal depart burn, and we will be reconfiguring the big loop once we get out of the ellipsoid.
So we got confirmation there from Mission Control and a read back from Dragon that they have exited this dynamic phase of flight and can now take off their spacesuits. As I was mentioning, this is a pretty carefully choreographed set of maneuvers, but now that we're through departure burn 1, we know that we've exited the keep-out sphere, which is a 200-meter radius invisible line around the International Space Station. Before moving into the keep-out sphere, spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross that imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft lost all maneuvering capability. This safety zone is set up to govern any visiting spacecraft, Dragon or any of the others we mentioned earlier in the webcast, when they're arriving or departing from the space station. Some beautiful views of the Earth from up in space there on your screen right now, too. And now that we are focused primarily on Dragon, as Rob mentioned, because the vehicles have now separated, you're following along with the speed and altitude of Dragon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen.
Dragon end station. This is Houston on the Big Loop. Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere. Endeavour crew, enjoy the ride home.
Endeavour crew copies on the Big Loop. Thank you.
So there we heard confirmation from both teams again that we have exited that keep-out sphere. And now we're waiting for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid, or AE for short, which is another imaginary shape. This time a three-dimensional ellipsoid, kind of a football shape, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers in the same family as that keep-out sphere. One of the key differences with the AE, though, is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. Instead of the 4 orbits we mentioned earlier, that means that a spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours again, even if it lost all maneuvering for that call-out, once we hear confirmation that Dragon is outside of the AE. So to recap what brought us to today, the hatches between the International Space Station and Dragon were closed earlier today at approximately
SpaceX Crew-11, cabin mic, com check, how do you read?
With our crew settled.
SpaceX has you loud and clear from the cabin mic.
We also loud and clear, thank you.
We just had good confirmations there that our Crew-11 team can hear mission control here in Hawthorne loud and clear. And our crew is beginning to settle in for that 10.5-hour journey back to Earth. So I'm going to toss it back to Rob over at NASA. Rob?
Thanks, Ronnie. The 2 spacecraft, Endeavour and the International Space Station, are currently flying just to the southeast of New Zealand, moving from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. The range between Endeavour and the station will continue to open up to a safe distance that will lead in the wee hours Thursday at 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time, to a deorbit burn that will be a 13-minute, 15-second retrograde braking maneuver for Endeavour to slow the vehicle down by 87.5 meters per second. Just as is the case for any returning vehicle from low Earth orbit velocity, this will enable Endeavour to enter back into the Earth's atmosphere for all of the key activities that will be associated with its 50-minute return trip through the atmosphere, through the area of peak heating, a brief period of a loss of signal while plasma builds up around the Dragon itself, and then a reacquisition of signal prior to the deployment of drogue chutes and the main chutes that will enable Dragon to gently splash down off the coast of San Diego at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time, early Thursday morning, wrapping up a 167-day mission. Once again, Crew-11 is on its way home a few weeks earlier than originally had been anticipated, but the crew is in good shape, ready for its arrival in the Pacific Ocean for a splashdown in the early morning hours on Thursday, where the SpaceX recovery team will quickly move into action to hoist the Dragon onto the well deck of the recovery ship and extract the crew, with their mission now having been completed. Everything has gone by the book. Endeavour in good shape. The International Space Station now crewed by 3 people: Chris Williams of NASA, Sergei Sverchkov, and Sergei Mikheyev of Roscosmos. They will be a 3-man crew for the next few weeks until the arrival of the Crew-12 crew on the next SpaceX Crew Dragon that will be launched from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. With that, we'll wrap it up from Mission Control here in Houston and go back to Ronnie Foreman at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne.
Thanks so much, Rob. With that, Crew-11 has officially departed the International Space Station. As we continue to move a safe distance from the station, we are preparing for that deorbit burn that Rob mentioned. Again, Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of San Diego at approximately 12:41 a.m. Pacific time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by a SpaceX recovery vessel. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return for our Dragon and Crew-11 astronauts. In case you are just joining us, we are following along as our Crew-11 astronauts depart the International Space Station. And right now we're standing by for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid, or AE, which is an imaginary football shape that is about 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers in the same family as the keep-out sphere, and basically governs the neighborhood of the International Space Station. One of the key differences between the approach ellipsoid that you see on the outside on the graphic on your screen and the keep-out sphere, which is that smaller inner circle, is that vehicles inside of the AE right now, or where we are right now, are on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. That means that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours again, even if it lost all maneuvering. So we are standing by for that call out to hear that we have exited the AE and that our Crew-11 astronauts continue on their way home. Now, to recap, earlier today, the hatches between the International Space Station and Dragon were closed. Since then, the crew has settled in to begin their 10.5-hour journey back to Earth. The joint NASA and SpaceX teams pulled go to proceed with undocking, and the undock command was then sent, followed by umbilical retraction and hook opening, with physical separation taking place right on schedule at 2:20 p.m. Pacific, as the space station and Dragon were traveling about 260 statute miles south of Australia. Dragon then completed 2 of 4 departure burns and exited the keep-out sphere. We are again now standing by from Dragon crossing the approach ellipsoid to set the spacecraft and Crew-11 up for their path back to Earth. On Splashdown tomorrow, we'll be marking the completion of a long-duration science and research mission for these 4 astronauts and the astronauts that were part of the broader expedition who are still on board the International Space Station. So because Dragon is still inside the approach ellipsoid, we are still currently in joint operations. And you're watching Mission Control Houston and Mission Control Hawthorne working together in the two different blocks on your screen. We mentioned this earlier in the webcast too, but you can follow along with Dragon's telemetry in the bottom of your screen. We just had that range measurement come up that you can track, looking at just about 800 meters away from the International Space Station right now. We're also tracking right now that about 1,000 meters or 1 kilometer is going to be the right boundary of that approach ellipsoid. So right now we're watching the number increase, which is exactly what we want to see as our Crew-11 astronauts depart the space station. Again, we are standing by right now for that departure from the approach ellipsoid. You can keep following that, as I mentioned, in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. That is the distance between Dragon and the International Space Station. And we think we'll hit that 1,000-meter, 1 kilometer mark here in just about another minute. If you were with us earlier in the broadcast, you know that we had great views of Dragon as it left the International Space Station. But now that we've moved away from it and we are on the darker side of the Earth, our views have gone offline for now. Obviously, we're still in touch with our astronauts, and we'll bring those images back to you either later in this broadcast or when we pick it up later this evening to follow splashdown and recovery of our Crew-11 astronauts. Coming up on about 970 meters away from the International Space Station. So we should hear that call out any second that we have exited the approach ellipsoid. Tracking 1 kilometer on your screen right there. So right now we're just waiting for that call out over the big loop between Mission Control Houston on the left and Mission Control Hawthorne on the right.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid and is on a safe free drift trajectory. Houston will be taking down the big loop shortly. Expect ISS audio traffic to cease. Following final comms, request swap of audio destination to Dragon to ground. Post swap, contact ground on Dragon to ground via the cabin mic for a comm check.
Dragon copies, in work.
So that announcement we just heard from Mission Control Hawthorne officially marks departure from the approach ellipsoid and the end of joint operations. That's why you heard our team explaining how communications protocols would change from here through the end of the mission. Crew-11 has officially departed the International Space Station, and now we'll expect them back here on Earth about 10.5 hours from now, again splashing down off the coast of San Diego. The crew is currently doffing or removing their spacesuits to settle in for that ride home. Splashdown should be early tomorrow morning at 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time, 2:41 a.m. Central, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by a SpaceX recovery vessel. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return for Dragon and our Crew-11 astronauts. Meanwhile, we'll rejoin you for live visual coverage starting roughly 1 hour prior to splashdown, so we'll be back at about 11:40 p.m. Pacific. As always, you can find mission updates on X at NASA, at SpaceX, and on the web at nasa.gov. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you on our Crew-11 astronauts again soon.